Welcome, ladies and gents. Chris Andre here. You can find me at BetBoxing on Twitter. Of course, you can subscribe to the channel. Let's talk boxing. Let's start off talking about the two Jose's, Ramirez and Pedraza. We'll talk about the entire undercard. I thought this was a brilliant fight. I personally had it a draw at 6 rounds apiece. I have no problem with 116, 112 either way. If it was going to be 116, 112, though, I did expect it to go to Ramirez, let's be honest. He is the cash cow of the two, the former unified champ in this division, the guy who's been with Top Rank for longer. He's Mexican. Mexican-American, so he has a bigger upside in terms of being a cash cow. I wasn't surprised. In terms of skill set, I actually thought it was a bit of a mismatch in some regards, but the weight discrepancy, the natural size discrepancy, closed that gap. But there were a lot of adjustments here, so let's talk about the little technical elements. What you saw early on is that Ramirez was trying to walk Pedraza down, but he was tentative to let his hands go. The only time he really was letting his hands go was when Pedraza's back would hit the ropes, and there would be nowhere for him to escape, and then he'd let his hands go. And even then, Pedraza was slick, rolling off his back foot, off the ropes, catching a lot of shots on his shoulder and escaping. And when he was not with his back up against the ropes, he was very accurate with his shots. He's called the sniper for a reason. He was very accurate with it, particularly with that backhand. Really nice well-placed shot when he switched to southpaw, that left-hand uppercut to the body, really slowing Ramirez down, making him tentative, making him think. But what I wanted to see more of, or consistently for Pedraza, is not to let his back hit the ropes. When you're a foot and a half away from the ropes, pivot out at that point. Throw a shot and pivot out. Even if it means you have to exchange in that point, don't let your back go off the ropes, because it was quite clear Ramirez needed quite a stationary target. He was not comfortable. He likes to fight in straight lines. I've spoken about this in the build-up to the Josh Taylor fight. He steps in with quite a long jab, and then from that long jab is when he starts to let go of the body work. So he likes to attack in quite a long straight line. Deontay Wilder does the same thing in a very different manner, right? But it's that thing of wanting to step forward into the shot. If you're constantly getting a guy like that to reset, because his stance wants to open up and become wider for him to start exchanging with you, then when he gets you up on the ropes, he doesn't mind squaring up. In fact, he does square up quite a lot. But to initially engage, he wants to widen that stance. So in that way, you don't want to give him that opportunity. And Pedraza early on had a good time of doing that. I thought it was 3-1 up after 4 rounds. In the middle rounds, it started to become a little bit closer. What Pedraza had to do, in my opinion, was to make it a Lara versus Warrington-esque type fight, a Mauricio Lara type approach. Because if you remember, Warrington had the hand speed advantage. He was landing the combinations. So what did Lara start to do? He started saying, okay, I'm not going to try and evade all your shots and punch after you, or even lead off on you for you to counter me, which is what was happening in this fight early on too. I'm going to punch with you. When you throw your 1-2s, I'm just going to throw 1-2 back. If you throw 3, I'm going to throw 1-2 back. I'm not going to try and match you for volume. What I'm going to do is try and outland you in terms of what's powerful. And that's what he started to do, and he started to aim it towards the body. He started to punch with Pedraza, and he started to have more success. What you started to see, however, is that although he was loading up on these big shots and he was landing some flush shots, it was Pedraza through the middle rounds that was often landing the more consistent stuff. He was finding a home quite consistently. So it became one of those things of, what do you prefer, the more rare hard shots or the more consistent accurate shots? I was going with the accurate shots because, number one, they were affecting each other equally. It's not like Ramirez was hitting Pedraza and Pedraza was wobbling, or Pedraza was landing on Ramirez and Ramirez was walking right through him. So he was just outworking him at times. But you would see again, as the fight wore on, around the 10th round, you started to see that Pedraza's bounce started to become a little bit more stationary. You know, before he was bouncing but landing a shot and pivoting out, turning out, changing the angles. After that, he started to bounce without really doing anything. He's bouncing, and you could see Ramirez is still tentative in that 10th round. He's not throwing any shots really. And it was a swing round because nothing much was happening. But you could see Pedraza was getting heavier. His legs were getting heavier. He wasn't really doing much with it. And he was, by staying in that line, you're giving Ramirez that opportunity to attack in straight lines. So he had to adapt from that, and he did adapt from that. In the 11th round, he landed 4 flush, lovely left hands in that round. And you could see why it was called the sniper. It really highlighted it. And Ramirez's foot pressure wasn't really being backed up with anything. And so I had it 6-5 in the 11th to Pedraza, and I thought, okay, this can only be a draw now. And although he started off really, really well, picking his shots at points, the way he picks his shots reminded me a little bit of Jorge Linares. It was that sort of approach, that sort of, that lovely little fluidity where he can just drop a lovely little shot to any opening he sees. He's, Algieri touched on the fact that he's looking for openings when you're throwing at him. And that's exactly what he was doing, something that Linares does. But he started to get outworked towards the end of the fight, in the end of the round, and he started to get bullied. The size, you could see as they were exchanging with each other, something Ramirez should have been doing earlier, in my opinion. You could see Ramirez's size started to play a role. Like I said, I had it a draw. I have no problem with it going either way. It does make Tank Davis and Lomachenko's wins over Pedraza look even better in my book. And this is why it's so frustrating to see the way Tank's being handled. He's obviously a top-class fighter, and he's only getting in there with B-rate dudes, right? So Tank needs to decide what it is that he really wants. You know, does he want to keep fighting these very winnable fights that make him a lot of money? Or does he want to understand that, listen, you only get one legacy. Go out there and take on the big names, because quite clearly you're more than capable of doing it. You've seen what a guy like Pedraza is able to do. Obviously, triangle theories don't work in boxing, but we know the levels that Tank Davis is at. But this was a great fight. Let me know how you scored it and what you thought of it. Let's talk about their heavyweight now as well. Richard TORREZ Jr. You know, I've been really excited to see TORREZ. He's an Olympic silver medalist, of course. He's stocky. He's got quite short arms, but he's got fast hands. And it's almost like his approach is almost like a lightweight. You saw him doing the sort of things that you see Lomachenko doing, the way we'll step around you and turn you and stuff like that. And obviously, this is a debut. His opponent wasn't a great opponent. But nonetheless, it's about the things that he's capable of doing. The way he moves, the way he feints. He doesn't fight like a typical heavyweight. You could tell he's very conscious of angles, always looking to get on the outside of your lead shoulder. He's very conscious of distance. He's 6'2", so he's quite a small heavyweight. I say stocky, he's quite a small heavyweight. And he fights out of a crouch, so he makes himself even smaller to force these big heavyweights to come and punch down. And because he's not a guy that will lean forward to come in and throw these big shots over the top, because of that, and you know, he can pull back on the inside. He's not always there for an uppercut, maybe to the solar plexus, but not really to the chin. So he does really force an opponent, a bigger opponent perhaps, to start punching down. You could tell he's got really good pedigree, really well schooled. He couldn't get the better of Jalilov in the amateurs. I think they fought 2 or 3 times, and I think Jalilov got the better of him on each of them. So, you know, he does have a bit of a boogeyman that's there already now in the pro game. But listen, Jalilov could go all the way. He's really top class. But it'll be interesting to see how TORREZ develops, because like I said, he looks like a lightweight. He fights almost like an amateur, but there's some pop there, you know, but the skill's there. And you have to remember, boxing is a 12-round fight. There's a time limit to it. A lot of people have this idea of you have to be a knockout puncher. You don't necessarily. And the heavyweights, they can all bang a little bit. So he doesn't have to be a one-punch knockout artist. And because he's so different to a lot of the big heavyweights out there, I'm interested to see if he can fill that sort of void and cause these bigger men problems, because he is going to be better coordinated. And you're seeing a few of these guys now that exist on the American scene. You know, you've got Jared Anderson, who's another one who's very, very agile. He's more agile in the upper body, and he's probably a bigger one-punch artist than TORREZ, I'd say, probably. But he's not a massive puncher either, I don't think, but heavy-handed enough. But TORREZ's feet are faster than Jared Anderson's, I believe, certainly in terms of those little shuffles for his distance control. So you're talking about 2 guys there that are movers. You've got Michael Hunter as well, who's come up from cruiserweight, who's a mover. So you've got some heavyweights there who could potentially cause the bigger, more cumbersome guys some problems. So I'm really interested to see how TORREZ develops. He won by knockout. He was cut. He was caught with 2 flush backhands at one point. And I'm wondering whether that's because he's small and he's trying to come into range, and that's going to happen regardless of what he does, or whether he just got a little bit overexcited, because the referee did wave the fight off, and then he actually made out like he didn't wave the fight off, and the fight continued. Maybe he lacked focus. I think he got a bit of a gash or a cut. I don't want to read too much into that. The fact of the matter is, he's an exciting prospect that I'm really interested in seeing. There's loads more work to be done, a lot more development to be done, but, you know, I'm looking forward to seeing it. Now, moving on from that, we saw Joet Gonzalez as well against Santisma. A lot of people were complaining that the stoppage was a little bit premature. It did stop in the 9th round. If you look at the stoppage alone, if you're going to see highlights of it, you're going to think, what is going on? They threw a punch at each other and he stopped it. But this was a brutal fight where Gonzalez did some really good work on the inside and he was landing a lot of big shots. And had it been stopped a little bit earlier, because of the amount of damage he'd taken, the doctor had already been in to see him and stuff, people wouldn't have complained. It was just the fact that it continued and then the stoppage occurred shortly afterwards. But generally speaking, Joet Gonzalez is really good on the inside. You could see that. He has lost, of course, to Shakur Stevenson. And listen, when you're up against Stevenson, he's a brilliant boxer who's great with his distance and his defense. So you're not going to land flush on him necessarily. Whereas with Navarrete, who's a bit of an animal, as you all know, he's also got a defeat there. That's a different type of defeat. But what I would love to see is Gonzalez go in there with Lara, a guy who is willing to sit there and exchange. That could end up being a fight of the year candidate. You know, you've got the likes of Lee Wood as well, if he comes through Conlon. Yeah, that would be interesting because on the night, Danny at DGF HAOLAIN, so DGF Haolin, was telling me he can't imagine that Eddie Hearn would let any of these fighters, any of these featherweights go near this guy. I guess he's kind of that in that who needs him club, right? Unless they're going to force now a situation where he becomes a mandatory or anything like that. He's very dangerous on the inside. He's a little warrior. So he's going to be in that situation of the who needs him club. But there are some really fun fights there to be made, particularly Lara. That's one I'd love to see. Finally, let's talk a little bit about Gabriel Flores Jr. You know, he won the fight. He's now 20-1. He's only 21-1. He's only 21 years old, right? So there is definitely potential for progression there. There's no doubt about it. He's still yet to get his man strength and things like that. But there's an awful lot of work that needs to be done with this kid, in my humble opinion. He doesn't have much power. He does have some good hand speed. But the problem is that although he's a decent mover by nature, his footwork is not very good. In other words, he has some athleticism for getting on the move. His feet aren't slow by any stretch of the imagination. He can throw combinations that are long, so there's no reason why he can't box off the back foot. But the problem is he doesn't have the power to stand a little bit more square on, set his feet and let go of his shots. And because his footwork isn't great, his feet come too close together, he stumbles out of position. The structural element of his footwork isn't great. He's also not ideal to box off the back foot as a result. So he's only got 7 knockouts out of those 21 wins. And it's almost like, what is this guy? Is he a back foot boxer? Or is he someone who's going to stand and throw combinations, which he likes to do, really trade? He needs to find an identity. And his dad, look, I'm not being disrespectful to any particular trainer here or anything like that. We're just talking honestly on this channel as we always do. His dad's advice at times was reminiscent of Teofimo Lopez's dad. Calling your son bro and come on bro, let your hands go bro. This is not technical advice. They're going to have to get back in the gym. They're going to have to work on a few things, perhaps bring in another trainer. They're talking about going up a weight category. They're saying that, he doesn't carry the weight particularly well anymore. He did, look, I know he doesn't look like he's too lean at the weight, but different guys look different. Some guys are just fleshy by nature, right? But for me, it's more than that. There's technical deficiencies there that need to be worked on. And for me, if I'm his trainer, I'm working with him to become a back foot fighter. Work with a guy like Hunter, if you can, Virgil Hunter. Work with Javier Centeno, if you're willing. Go and work with, come to the UK. Get in there with Dominic Ingle. Somebody's going to teach you about lines and exiting the lines properly and changing the angles. At the moment, there are a lot of deficiencies there, though. Let me know what you think about this particular fighter. There's a spark there, but there's a lot of work to be done. Let me know what you think about all the fights you've spoken about, the undercard and everything you saw here today. And please don't forget to hit that like button as well. It really helps the channel grow. If you haven't already, subscribe and hit the notifications button too. Thanks for watching, everyone. Take care. God bless.